You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and when I was a kid, I had some spooky Halloween costumes. Once I was a clown, and y'all, it was terrifying, maybe even more terrifying than the time that I was a witch or Jason from Friday the 13th. But as spooky season is upon us, I've been reflecting on the faces that we put on and the masks we wear. However, it's not just for Halloween, friends. There's an interpersonal concept called face. And today I want to explore this idea and how we can support our friends' faces. Okay, real talk. It might sound a little weird, but isn't that what spooky season is all about? Also, it's just language we might not use every day, but it's an idea that reflects our daily interpersonal interactions. So enter if you dare, friends. I wrote in my notes, insert evil laugh, and that was my evil laugh. Okay, so what is face? When you look in the mirror, you see your own face, and when walking down the street, you may look into other people's faces, right? The people that you pass, you're like, there's their face. Okay, so then what the heck do I mean by face if we don't mean what I look at in the mirror? According to a sociologist, Erving Goffman, quote, all people have a social self, a public image, or as Goffman called it, a face that we display during interaction, end quote. In the 2015 chapter on face theory and engaging in interpersonal theories written by Sandra Metz and William Kupak, our public self is socially constructed, and quote, that losing it is a uniquely human concern, end quote. They provide examples of instances in which we might experience nervousness, like a job interview, a first date, or even presenting a speech. So, for example, stumbling over one's words like I just did there and having other flubs on an interview might be embarrassing and mean that we lose face in that particular interaction or situation. Face, then, is what, quote, you want others to see and know about you during an interaction. In the interpersonal communication textbook entitled Reflect and Relate by Stephen McCornack and Kelly Morrison, our face is something we're continuously and actively working on. The active part really showcases the hashtag you do you, which means we can be whoever the heck we want to be. Is that being fake? No, that's presenting a public image we want to present, which is different than how we might behave when we're by ourselves privately. Right? So when I'm at home, it might be different than when I walk out the door and see a neighbor. Oh, hey! Or come to class. Okay, today, students, any of those sorts of things is very different than me sitting at home and being my private self. So that is sort of the difference, is that when we leave the house, we might be on, so to speak. And so, sure, people may change faces to fit in. Or I even think about young people trying some faces on as a way to figure out who they are, or even making a change in one's life may be about changing a face. So it's not necessarily that it's fake, it's that it's constantly changing and we can actively change it. And so a face might be being polite. And so when you're in public, then you communicate politeness, right? So let's take a little bit more of a look into how we might put on a face to change something about our life. Okay. So, for example, I joke a lot about Taco Bell. Love it, call it my love language, and I go to Taco Bell frequently. Perhaps then I want to be seen as a fun-loving, no-care Taco Bell fan. But what if I want to make a change regarding my health? I might take on a quote-unquote healthy face. And so students might be surprised when I stop talking about Taco Bell and I start talking about healthy things that I'm eating in class. They might be like, what has happened with Dr. Lucas? Has she been kidnapped? Because that might be the thing she puts on Twitter. I'm no longer going to eat Taco Bell, right? But some of my friends and students may remember this, though, that something like this has already happened in my life. So approximately 2011, 12, 13, I was quote unquote clean eating, which is where you eat food that has 5 ingredients or less, or that you know what all the ingredients are. And that was essentially healthy eating, and it's very different from my Taco Bell face. And so basically life changes and we go through phases. I mean, we go through phases. So think about it. Like, what face do you present when you leave the house? Is it something like politeness? Do you want to be seen as like, don't mess with me? Do you want to have people know that you are someone who's helpful? Do you want to be seen as a good worker? So yes, we create and enact our face through communication, and we can put forth different faces for what McCormick and Morrison call, quote, different moments in relationships, end quote. So in different moments in our day, we might have to put on a face. How many of you would say, oh gosh, this really coincides well with the pandemic? Because, before you join the meeting on Zoom, you're like, oh my God, we can do it. We can make it through it. Good. A little pep talk to yourself. Like, all right, we can do this. We can fire up, hype up. Let's go get some caffeine, make it through. And then you join the meeting and you're like, hey, everyone, waving at people. Cause obviously that's what we do when we're on Zoom. So we might even have a way that we present ourselves when we're online, right? So let's take a look at some of the faces that I might have, and they are based on roles in relationships. And then I'll go through some different moments. So obviously the first face I'm going to talk about is friend, right? Like, how do I want to be seen as a friend? Do I want to be viewed as someone who's friendly, who has friends, who loves friendship, who wants to talk about it, right? Like, how do I communicate my face as a friend? So I can do that with people who I might not be friends with because I might be about connection, right? I can do that with, one-on-one with my friends. Like, what are some of the things to enact a friend face would be to listen when a friend is talking, to tell them that, oh, I'm so glad we get to spend time together. I'm so glad we're friends. It could be, doing them a favor, so I have a friend face, right? So that might not be on all the time, but it definitely is on perhaps when I'm recording this podcast or when I'm talking about friendship or I'm looking for new friends or I'm with my friends. Okay? Another face I have would be, now my position at the university as a professor, which includes a lot of different roles, right? It includes doing research and service. And I have a major role with athletics, which is about being an advocate for student athletes. So all those would be different, right? When you put on your research face, some people might, you have to put on a different hat depending on what your roles are, is like what we might have heard before. But Erving Goffman sees interpersonal interaction almost like a performance. So putting on a face might be like putting on the makeup before a play, or we'll talk about masks in a little bit, but putting on a mask to present on stage. So I have those different roles, but specifically for this episode, I can talk about my teacher role, right? So one of the things might be I could be having the worst day in my life, and then I could be walking down the hallway, and then as soon as I enter the class, actually, it's like as soon as I leave my car in the parking lot, where again, I'm probably in my car going, you can do this. My little pep talks during the pandemic. All right, you can do this, little positive affirmations. You are enough. You're a good teacher, right? Then once I get out of the car, my face is on because I might run into students that I know and saying hi. And I want to be seen as a teacher who is caring and thoughtful and makes connections with other people. And it's not that I just want to be seen that way. That's how I act, right? So that would be my face as a teacher. So if I'm having the worst day ever, when I walk in, it's like, I got my teacher face on, tell me everything. How's everyone doing today? Let's connect. Let's learn. Let's have some fun. Let's do all these things. Let's be thoughtful. And, some days might not be the best, but you put on that face and you're hoping for the best, right? So then certainly there's other things like being a good colleague. Certainly as a podcaster, I would like to be seen as someone who's thoughtful about the things she does. But then there can be some challenges, right? And we'll talk about this in a minute, is like the challenges. I want to be seen as someone who is a consistent podcaster, but the pandemic has certainly gotten in the way. So then that becomes something that is can be embarrassing. It could impact how people view me as a podcaster. So, there might be some cognitive dissonance over, what I want to be seen as, and what might actually happen because of what's impacting my life on a daily basis. But then we can also just think about personality traits, like having the face of like being fun, right? Like, who wants to go to a party and be like, you know what? This will be the face where it's like, screw you, don't talk to me. Like sometimes people will, get hyped up to go out to a party and like have on their, this is fun, Alysa. I think of that Friends episode, Fun Bobby, So that might be something as a face as well. It could be personality traits, or I like to think that during a pandemic that my face is a generally functioning adult. Again, I'm at home giving myself a pep talk, right? So there's lots of things that we want people to know about us, how we want to be viewed or perceived by other people. And this is certainly something that happens in the public. It can change if we want to change something about our life, but we're actively doing it, which is why we can change our face depending on what might be happening, who we're interacting with, and what kind of moment we're having. But as I said, sometimes things can be embarrassing. But what happens when I don't follow through on a friend promise, or I make a mistake in the classroom, or as I mentioned, I have difficulty maintaining a consistent release schedule for the podcast? This means I lose face. And that is something, as I mentioned before from Erving Goffman, is that this is a concern of humans and we do not like it. And McCormack and Morrison describe this as my public image being one thing, and that there might be some information that conflicts with or contradicts with my face. And that means with that information, the contradiction, the conflict, that I'm going to lose face. And even more people can threaten our face. This makes me think of someone pulling a prank in front of a large audience to make someone look silly or stupid on purpose, or when people might challenge or question you in front of others. Because we want to be seen as capable people, we want to be seen as credible, and so when someone threatens or challenges us, then that might be some sort of loss of our credibility. So yes, there are a number of consequences from losing face, like experiencing embarrassment, hits to our credibility, changes in the impressions people have of us, and so much more. And just think even more if someone challenges your face and it's recorded and then put online, right? Or you want to be seen as a good teacher, and now there's a video going around of a teacher who wore a headdress and is doing movements and essentially cultural appropriation and some problematic behaviors in dancing in front of her students. And it is just, it's awful, right? It's racist, it's problematic. There's students in the classroom who are Native American, and we should never take on someone's culture and either, make fun of it or mock it or any of those things. And someone had said in a thread that I was looking at that she was teaching them some sort of mnemonic to remember something for, oh goodness, some math class that I never took because I was done once. I was done before we started. But the idea is if she wants to be seen as an engaging teacher and thoughtful and doing her best and so on and so forth, certainly not only does that behavior make her lose face, and then the consequences of it's embarrassing, it's her credibility, people change their impressions of her, and she could lose her job, and there's so many consequences that can come from it, and even more because it's online. And certainly if there are teachers who are participating in racist behaviors in the classroom, that maybe they shouldn't be in the classroom. And so in some cases, recordings help us, make sure that these things aren't happening. But in other ways, for some people, like a prank, and it ends up on TikTok, someone's not okay with it, and it has 1 million views, and, that's something that can do even more damage to one's face. So what do we do? I mean, first off, don't put on headdresses and do racist stuff in the classroom. But talking about generally people who on a daily basis are just doing their best, we have to consider we don't want to lose face. And that means we need to use communication to actively maintain our face. Or what that means is act in ways that reflect the face we've adopted. So if you want to look like a hardworking employee, then showing up late and not doing your work would not be maintaining face, that'd be losing face. So if you want to be seen as a good worker or a hard worker, then there are some things that you might communicate or do actively to really reinforce and maintain that face. And sometimes there's nothing we can do to maintain it. For example, being a good friend means I care for the things my friends let me borrow. So let's say I borrow a sweater from my friend. Thanks, friend. Finally having some fall weather here in Michigan. Need to put a sweater on. And then I throw it into the laundry without much thought because I'm busy and I just want to be sure that it's taken care of. And maybe I didn't do as much care as I should have. And it shrinks. So now my friend has a sweater that they used to wear that maybe now one of our pets can wear. And the point of that is that sweater is not coming back, right? It's not going to unshrink itself. So this means we have to restore our face. And that is where you apologize, you correct the behavior, doing things of what you can do to sort of get back some of the face that you had before. And we'll talk about apologies more in depth in another episode, but that might not be the only thing that we can do to restore face. So I could apologize profusely to my friend for shrinking their sweater and then get them another one to replace it, or PayPal them some money so they could buy a new sweater, right? There's things that we can do to correct the errors of our way or to restore the face and really reinforce the fact that we are, in fact, a good friend. So face is our public self, right? So these are, again, we have multiple faces. This is how we want people to see us, what we want them to know about us. But then there's also this idea of a mask, okay? So what is a mask? Goffman described this as a strategic public face used to hide our private self. And I remember as an undergraduate student, my teacher describing a mask being in a situation as a parent who has maybe an injured child, like something grotesque, like, ooh, yeah, they're going to be fine, but in this moment, it's gross. So the parent hides their emotion when trying to calm their injured child. It's like the meme of the dog sitting in a room on fire saying, it's fine, because if you're like, oh my God, it's not fine. I mean, maybe the dog should quickly yet calmly walk to the door and get out of there. But the idea is if the parent freaks out, then the kid is going to freak out. And then that's probably not good for anyone. It can make the entire situation worse. So other examples of wearing a mask may include hiding grief. So maybe you've lost someone in your life. So when you're in public, you wear a mask to hide the grief that you're experiencing. And some people might do this because they don't want to have conversations. It might not be seen as appropriate. They don't want the grief to overcome them in a public place. There's lots of reasons. Or some people might say, it's just none of your business. This is my grief and you're not a part of it. So lots of reasons to do it. And another example that I think hits close to home for a lot of people is that someone who has high functioning depression and anxiety, others may never know. So when I was drafting this and coming up with the examples that I wanted to share, I looked up the topic of a functioning person with depression and anxiety, and the first article came up has the title, Face Behind the Mask. And I was like, hello. This is exactly what we're talking about here. You have the mask over, what you might actually be experiencing. And maybe your face is to really showcase that you're put together, that you're strong, but you have to wear a mask because sometimes it's harder to feel and look put together or to feel like you're strong or come across as you're strong. So this is a 2021 article by Nadia Khan, and it's from the BetterHelp webpage. And so here's a quote from the article to reflect this idea. Quote, on the surface, they appear to be accomplished people who are going to work, participating in social engagements, going on dates, or being a great partner. On the inside, just getting through the day can leave those same people feeling exhausted, end quote. So they're doing all these things that might enact a face, but to really what they're doing is masking something else that's going on, their private self, which they may or may not even share with a partner, or friend, or family member. So McCormick and Morrison come up with some other ideas of why we might wear masks or when people wear those masks. And so they talk about folks using masks to impress people or to inflate one's estimation of them. So maybe this is like lying, maybe a little exaggeration to impress, someone who's interviewing for a job or to impress a crush or a first date. Or another way to use a mask is to minimize the estimation by acting as if you're disorganized before a presentation and then blowing people's minds or expectations out of the water. And so in some cases, like Goffman said, we might perform, and sometimes we might perform a little bit more than what we have. We might perform a little bit less than what we have. And it is all in a way to impact how people see us when we're in public. So in a 2019 article from the Exploring Your Mind webpage, folks hide a few things that they talk about in this article. So the first one they talk about in terms of why someone might hide something from their private self is the process of rehearsing for our role. So as a teacher, I can spend hours coming up with an activity. Prepping takes a long time, especially when it's a new class. So I'm doing all this stuff to come up with examples and all that. And then I just roll into class like, I just came up with it off the cuff. Like, hey, everyone, let's do this thing. Like, no, we don't talk about the process, right? That we just go and act our role. But privately, we're doing perhaps all this work that people don't see. So that reminds me of the image of like, the tip of the iceberg is what people see, and then what we hide or what people can't see is underneath the water. So the tip of the iceberg is me, hopefully killing a lesson in class, like, hey, yeah. Or in the article, they talk about as if previously the teacher knew nothing about the topic, which is true. At some point, we don't know things, and then we know things, right? Either from reading, doing research, years of experience, practice, and more. But that's not what people might see, and that might not be what we present. And so in some ways, we are hiding that. Okay. So additionally, thinking about the iceberg underneath the water, the second thing the Exploring Your Mind webpage says people hide from or hide from others is all of the dirty work it took to get where we are. So we might not talk about all the things that we had to do to, make it through graduate school. They can't take the degree away. It's mine. But, people might not talk about like the experiences for how they got to a certain spot. And so we don't see the effort. We don't see the fighting tooth and nail. We don't see whatever might happen there unless people communicate that to us. And so maybe hiding the dirty work is a way to say, like, maybe I'm naturally good at this thing because I didn't have to do all this work, right? And therefore, they might also hide the process of rehearsing, right? And finally, this Exploring Your Mind webpage article talks about we hide whatever could keep us from continuing with our act. So the performance that we have of being our public self and maybe hiding some of our private self is that we keep criticisms to ourselves because we don't want to threaten other people's face. Maybe there's a little self-deception in the sense that maybe our self-criticisms we might try to hide from so that doesn't impact our ability to continue. And also, especially in public, right, that if someone does in fact criticize or insult us, is that we avoid reacting to it defensively. And 10-year-old Alysa laughs because I think I was really sensitive and defensive at that time. So it's like, I wouldn't avoid that. I'd be like, you're mean, or leave me alone, right? but that if we react to those insults, that could have an impact on how people see us. Again, changing the impression and all the consequences that come from losing face might also come if we don't hide some things behind a mask. So in the end, why should we care, right? So Goffman's work, which is from the 50s, 1950s, do I have to say that now? Okay, so it's older work, but it's still something to consider, that communication in our relationships and these interactions that we have, as Goffman would say, are performative based. And there's just certain ways that we want to be seen by other people. And I think even something like just being, someone that just goes throughout the day without any mishaps is something that a lot of people want to have, because even if you like trip and fall, you knock something over, all those things might, people might judge us like, oh, clumsy, and they might associate other maybe negative terms or adjectives with us because of that. And so even little mishaps like tripping, can cause a lot of embarrassment. Now, I have a high level or a high tolerance, and I might have talked about this last year when I did talk about pranks, is I have a high level for embarrassing myself. I'm in control of that, and that might be part of my face and mask. I might have to reflect on that a little bit more. But I do have a very low tolerance for people embarrassing other people, right? Like that makes me super uncomfortable because I think about face, right? And so you might see on Twitter on April Fool's Day, I'll say something like, be careful out there, it's National Face Threatening Day, right? Because it's all about pranks. It's about believing something that isn't true. It's about making people feel silly. Some things are funny, some things are not. And so in a way, we should care because it is something that's happening every day, and we are enacting and we are performing in public differently than we would privately. And privately, I mean by myself, right? And so, but there's other ways and other reasons to care. So I have it split into two main categories. For self, like you as an individual person, why is this important to know, right? And then the second part is friend. Why would it be important to know? Because you have friends, right? So let's talk about the self. As an individual, like I need to do, reflecting on myself and my high tolerance for embarrassing myself, you can reflect on your public image, what faces that you've adopted, what faces you use, maybe ones that you might want to like, hey, it might be time to hang up that face. It's like retiring it like a jersey. It's going up in the rafters, like for basketball players. And because sometimes our face, it could be aggressive, it could be problematic, it could be toxic. And so reflecting on some things, maybe there's a face that, yeah, we want to retire. Maybe there's a face we'd like to adapt, or a face that, maybe we need to dust off. And, sometimes you feel a little rusty dusty, but hopefully when you get that face back on, it's like riding a bicycle. So that's the first thing, is you can reflect on your public image, and then also consider what masks you may wear or feel like you have to wear. And so what are you keeping from other people? If it's something that's none of their business, then hey, fine. If it's something that might be problematic for you, or it's something you're working on, then like that's something to consider as well. Because I also recall as an example that sometimes, and I don't like that it might sound deceptive. Again, it's strategic because it's our business. But an example that people have used with masks is like someone who's not out of the closet as gay or trans, right? That they wear a mask in public because it's not anyone's business what their gender identity is, or who they might be in love with, or whatever. That's them, and they might also be figuring it out, because in our society we might force people into closets, or we might force people to wear masks, and there's stigma attached to things. And in the way I feel is that everyone should be able to be out and live their life, and everyone deserves to be happy, healthy, and safe. But but at the same time, people might not be comfortable with other people knowing, or they have to sort of conquer, maybe some acceptance and thinking about how they might communicate it to family members. And so, it's just one of those things like, hey, understanding ourselves, why we're doing things. It's all helpful in being perhaps a better communicator, a better partner in whatever relationship it might be, being more effective in particular interactions or moments, and just really understanding sort of how the world works or what other people might be doing. Like, why does this person act the way they do at meetings? Why do they act this way when they see someone they like, right? It's face a mask, friend, face a mask. So in terms of considering yourself, also, because this is an active process, remember that you can change and adopt faces. So I talked a little bit about that, but let's say you want to present yourself as upbeat or as what I might call real talk. So someone who's just like, listen. And it might not be radical honesty where they're rude to other people or things like that. It might just be like, this is where I'm at today. I feel like I'm very much have a real talk face during the pandemic. Like, real talk, this pandemic is awful, and I just want to lay on the couch all day. And I just want to not fake it through a pandemic and be like, everything's okay. So in some ways, I think for myself, the reflection there is that I might refuse to wear a mask, but sometimes I have to, like in the workplace or where I don't want to freak out someone else, like someone who might be like, oh my God. So there's lots of things to reflect on. I'm certainly someone who's like, hey, I was a perfectionist. I probably still am, but I definitely want to focus on progress and not perfection. And that maybe we could always be a little bit better or consider what we're doing in relationships so that, just keeping an eye on ourselves. What's going on? Maybe we can give ourselves a pep talk. It's okay. Today wasn't a good day, but tomorrow I can adopt a new face, right? And you can do it. You can do whatever you want. # you do you. You are in charge of your life. But additionally, why I think the concepts of face and mask are important is because I think it can help us be better friends. So particularly our friend face, right? But we can help out friends, and we can do it in a number of ways. Let's help our friends maintain their face. That's right. And that means we can protect it. So we can serve as someone who is like, I don't know, I just think of like a battle scene where it's like you're protecting, maybe a person. And so you're in front of them with the sword in front of all the enemies. And you're like, I'm going to protect their face, right? Get away. And it might help make decisions about what we may say or do and when or where as a way not to challenge our friend's face, even if we didn't mean to. So if we let some information slip or we interrupt our friends a lot or we do something that might make them look in a certain way in public, then that's something that we can focus on, right? We can make decisions to be like, this is the face that my friend wears, or that I know in particular they're sensitive to this topic or this particular interaction, so let me help them in that interaction. Let me be sure to help maintain their face and protect their face. So we can also, we have maintain and protect, we can also help restore their face if we see someone else threatening their face, technically. It's a way to help your friend enact their face. You can show care, support, and loyalty. So that could be defending them. That could be saying something that brings back some restoration for the face. There could be a number of ways that we can communicate a way to help them restore. Even more, if you're aware of the masks your friends may wear, you can also help maintain those for them, right? So going back to the example of someone who's not out, well, then you're not going to out them, right? It's up to someone to come out of the closet themselves. It's up to them to let people know in their life what's going on. And so as a friend, we can say, I know that they're out of the closet to me, but not to everyone else. So that's something that we talk about privately, but not anything we talk about in front of other people, because this is something where they're protecting something specifically about their private face, right? And so it goes back to some of the things that I talk about in classes regarding information. Some information isn't our business. Some information isn't ours to share. And so being a good friend, especially with keeping confidences, is being sure that you follow any rules they have about sharing information. So let's say your friend shares a secret and it is reflective or it gives the reason why they're wearing a mask, then you're not going to be the one that tells everyone that information. It's their information to share, right? So you can protect that. And what might be especially helpful is knowing that sometimes our friends wear masks because they are grieving or because they are high functioning with depression and anxiety. And so that might be helpful in being like, let's check on our friends, right? They might communicate strength in public, but that might be their mask. And so that reminds me of the meme, like, check on your strong friends too. And especially during this pandemic nonsense. So there might be people who are always about like, this is how I present myself as together, as strong, but that might not be the case. So even if someone seems like they have it together, they might not. They might be wearing a mask. And I think a lot of us, well, except myself, who has the real talk mask on apparently, or a real talk face, that a lot of people might be wearing masks right now, being like, yeah, everything's fine. Narrator says it was not fine, right? And so this is just a good reminder to check in on our friends. Finally, know that our faces and our friends' faces are active, but consider that sometimes we might not be able to keep up with our faces on some days, which means they might come across as having a bad friendship moment or a bad face moment where they lose face and it's with you, but then you can say, hey, you know what? It happens. It's active, so we can fix it up and move forward the next day. So that, we're always trying to maintain these faces, and we might not be able to, we might have issues doing so, or we might just be having a bad day. And of course, I hate to end here. Awkward. But it is important to consider, as we have been talking about friendship breakups, that sometimes folks may wear masks, and then whatever is being hidden can end up hurting you in the end. So as a way of considering what masks are our friends wearing, is it something towards the public? Is it something towards us in public? And that might be where you need to make a decision. And so I guess this is a good reminder or announcement that we still have an episode about friendship breakups coming out, and that deals with the grieving process and coping and how we move on. So you might reflect back on your friendship breakups and be like, I didn't see this because they were wearing a mask, right? So what do you think after listening? Are you like, I'm going to keep faces to like makeup and masks to Halloween? Or do you recognize your own faces and masks, or the faces and masks that others wear, especially your friends? Has anyone ever tried to challenge your face in front of others and try to embarrass you? Did a friend help you if they were there and witnessed it? Or maybe it was a friend who challenged your face. You know me. I want to hear all about it. So feel free to email me with any ideas, thoughts, or examples or stories at friendswithalysa@gmail.com, or you can find me on social media. I'm Friends with Alysa on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the web, and then on Twitter, it's FriendsWAlysa. So until next time, friends, maintain yours and your friends' faces, because without our friends, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Greetings, my excellent friends.
Quarantine has been difficult for most of us. Movie theaters closed, restaurants were restricted, and shopping was tedious. watching movies became a reprieve. I'm Matt.
And I'm Tara. Join us as we explore the expansive world of film, from grisly horror
To cliché action.
and everything in between.
Concession Corner is a movie and cinema-based podcast where, as a married couple, we view movies together and share our thoughts on it afterwards.
I'll uncover fan theories and rumors which often accompany many films across any genre.
Listen to us on the go, in the office, or just relaxing in bed.
You can find Concession Corner on Instagram and Twitter. We'll be posting new episodes bi-weekly with upcoming movies at the end of each episode.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.